all here this evening. I'd like to remind you that tomorrow at 11 a.m. at Watermark Books, which is on the 200 block of North Broadway, William Burroughs will be doing a signing of his books, and I invite you all to come. Now I would like to introduce to you William S. Burroughs, noted author and orator, and on my very, very short introduction, I introduce to you William S. Burroughs. Thank you.
This is an old number that is once again timely and current. Actually, it was written 10 years ago for A.B. Hoffman's Defense Fund. It is called a MOB, M-O-B, for my own business. Drawing a line between the Johnsons and the Schitts. Now, this planet could be a reasonably pleasant place to live if everybody could just mind his own business and let others do the same. But a wise old black faggot said to me years ago, "Some people are shits, darling." I was never able to forget it. Most of the trouble in this world has been caused and is being caused by people who can't mind their own business, because they have no business of their own to mind any more than a smallpox virus. Now, the mark of a hardcore shit is that he has to be right. An example of the genre is the late Henry J. Anslinger, former commissioner of narcotics. The laws must reflect society's disapproval of the addict, he said, a disapproval which he took every opportunity to foment. Such people poison the air we all breathe with the blight of their disapproval. Southern lawmen feeling their nigger notches, decent church-going women with pinched, mean faces. Any form of maintenance is immoral, said Harry, thus rejecting the obvious solution to the so-called drug problem. It is to be remembered that in the good old days, which conservatives so fondly evoke, opiates, cocaine, and cannabis tincture was sold across the counter from sea to shining sea. On the other hand, the Johnson minds his own business. But he will give help when help is needed. He won't stand by when someone is drowning or trapped under a burning car or under physical attack. I remember in New York, 40 people just stood there and watched someone killed with a pointed stick by a mental patient. Didn't do a thing. And he will not stand by when animals and children are being abused. Now, things like that are everybody's business. Now, along come Regan and Nancy hand in hand to say that no one has the right to mind his own business. Indifference is not an option. Only outspoken insistence that drug use will not be tolerated. Everyone is obligated to become hysterical at the mere thought of drug use, just as office workers in 1934 were obligated to scream curses like Pavlov's frothing dogs. when the enemy leader appeared on screen, and they'd better scream loud and scream ugly. I remember during the Mike Bell flap, eyewitness news was going around prowling the streets, sticking mics in everybody's face. Well, I think that making the money they do, they should be serving as an example. Now, she gets plenty of mic time. And here's a black cat working on some underground cables, straightens up and says, I think if someone uses drugs, it's his own biz. Boy, did they get that mic out of his face. He didn't even get the word out. Freedom of the press to say what they want to hear and call it the voice of the people. Urine tests. Our pioneer ancestors would piss in their graves at the thought of urine tests to decide whether a man is competent to do his job. The measure of competence is performance. When told that General Grant had a drinking problem, Lincoln said, find out what brand of whiskey he drinks and distribute it to the other generals. Dr. Halsted, one of the great American surgeons who introduced antiseptic procedures at a time when surgeons, far from donning rubber gloves, did not even wash their hands, and the death rate from post-operative infections ran up to 80%. Well, he was a lifelong morphine addict, but he could still hack it and hack it good. And he lost no patience because of his personal habit. In those good old days, a man's personal habits were personal and private. Now even a citizen's blood and urine are subject to arbitrary seizure and search. Why, the world's greatest detective could not have survived a urine test. Which is it this time, Holmes, cocaine or morphine? Watson asks. It's rather disquieting to speculate what may lurk behind this colossal red herring of the war against drugs, a war neither likely nor designed to succeed. One thing is obvious. Old clean money and new dirty money are shaking hands under the table. And the old tried and failed police approach will continue and escalate. In politics, if something doesn't work, that is the best reason to go on doing it. If something looks like it might work, stay well away. A thing like that could make waves. And the boys at the top, they don't like waves. Anslinger's missionary work, as he called it, has fallen on very fertile ground in Malaysia, where there's a mandatory death penalty for possession of more than half an ounce of morphine or heroin and more than 7 ounces of cannabis or hashish. Anyone suspected of trafficking can be detained without trial. The police can subject anyone on the street to a urine test. And if positive, he's forced to undergo 2 years in a rigorous rehabilitation center. Not content with setting up a corner of hell in their own country, the Malaysian baboons, purple-ass with rage, call upon all other countries to identify with them, to enact similar laws, and to bray out with one unified snarl against the drug menace. To get to the bottom of any issue, ask yourself, who profits? Malaysia is where most of the world's drug money is laundered. And sums involved are not millions, but billions and trillions of dollars. A common sense approach to the so-called drug problem, maintenance for those who cannot or will not stop, and treatment for those who do want to stop, would precipitate a catastrophic collapse of the black drug market and cut off the salubrious flow of dirty money to the laundries of Malaysia. Setting the record straight, 50 years deep in the Ural Mountains of Lower Slobovia, a 13-year-old prick named Pavlik Morozov denounced his father to the local authorities as a counter-revolutionary kulak. Got a pig hid in his basement. A kulak is a subsistence farmer. And that was when Stalin was starving out the kulaks to make way for the collective farms that didn't work. Stalin levied an outrageous produce tax, knowing that the farmers would hide their crops, then sent out patrols to search and seize concealed produce and farm animals. At least 3 million people starved to death in the winters of 1932 and 33, and that's a conservative estimate. Little Pavlicki was hacked to stroganoff by the outraged neighbors. Good job and all, thus perish all talking assholes. His name must not die, sobbed Maxim Gorky. So Pavlicki becomes a folk hero. Got a street in Moscow named after him and a statue to commemorate his heroic death. He should have been sculpted with the head of a rat. And the village of Gerasimovna is a shrine drawing legions of youthful pilgrims to the home of Pavlik Morozov. Dirty little stukach. That's Ruski for rat, a word designed to spit out. He may be a folk to the Ivans, he's just a lousy fink to me. And it is happening here. Journal World, October 29th, girl 10 reports mother's drug use. This was the 4th time a California girl has turned in her parents for alleged drug abuse since August 13th. And Attorney Meese says that management has the responsibility and the obligation for surveillance of problem areas such as locker rooms and above all toilets, and the toilets in nearby taverns to prevent drug abuse. Well, I'm an old-fashioned man. I just don't like informers. It looks like Meese and Reagan intend to turn the United States into a nation of rats. Thank you. Introducing old man Bickford, cattle, oil, real estate. He owns a big piece of a big state. One of the poker-playing, whiskey-drinking, evil old men who run the United States of America. To these backstage operators, presidents, ambassadors, cabinet members are just jokes and errand boys. They do what they are told to do or else. Jess Sanford knows he is in trouble when the old man steers him into a little side room with one chair. The old man sits down and smiles. You know, Jess, I've got an intuition about you. I think you'd make a mighty fine president. Jess turns pale. Oh, no, Mr. Bickford, I don't have the qualifications. I disagree with you. I think you do have the qualifications. You got a big mouth. Now just knows where he went wrong. He talked too much at the wrong time to the wrong people. Please, Mr. Beckford, I got a bad heart. The job would kill me. Beckford's smile widens. This text published in Harper's, in answer to the question, when did you stop wanting to be president, has the unique distinction of perusal by the President of the United States. The same question was addressed to Reagan, who was then governor of California, and his answer is right next to mine. When did I stop wanting to be president? Not me. I don't have the qualifications. My political ambitions were of a humbler and less conspicuous caliber. I aspired at one time to become Commissioner of Sewers for St. Louis County. $300 a month with every possibility of getting one shitty pause deep into a slush fund. To this end, I attended a softball game where such sinecures were assigned to the deserving and the fortunate. Everybody I met said, now I'm old so-and-so running for such and such, and anything you do for me, I'll appreciate. My boyish dreams fanned by this heady atmosphere and 3 mint juleps, I saw myself already in possession of the coveted post, which called for a token appearance twice a week to sign a few letters at the old courthouse. While I'm there, might as well put it on the sheriff for some marijuana he has confiscated, and he'd better play ball or I will route a sewer through his front yard. And then across the street to the courthouse cafe for a coffee with some other lazy, worthless bastards in the same line of business. And we wallow in corruption like contented alligators. Reagan read all this. I never wanted to be a front man like Harding or Nixon, taking the rap, shaking hands, and making speeches all day. Who in his right mind would want a job like that? As Commissioner of Sewers, I would not be called upon to pet babies, make speeches, have lunch with the Queen. In fact, the fewer voters who knew of my existence, the better. Let kings and presidents keep the limelight. I prefer a whiff of coal gas as the sewers rupture for miles around. I've made a deal on the piping, which has bought me a $30,000 home, and there is talk in the press of sex cults and drug orgies carried out in the stink of what made them possible. Fluttering from the roof of my ranch-style house over my mitten marijuana, Old Glory floats lazily in the tainted breeze. But there were sullen mutters of revolt from the peasantry. My teenage daughters is cunt deep in shit. Is this the American way of life? I thought so, and I didn't want to change. Sitting there in my garden, smoking the sheriff's reefers, coal gas on the wind, sweet in my nostrils as the smell of oil to an oil man or the smell of bullshit to a cattle baron. I sure did a sweet thing with those pipes, and I'm covered too. What I got on the governor wouldn't look good on the front page, would it now? And I have my special police to deal with vandalism and sabotage. All handsome youths, languid and vicious as reptiles, described in the press as no more than minions, lackeys and bodyguards to His Majesty the Sultan of Sewers. The thoughts of youth are long, long thoughts. Then I met the gubernatorial candidate, and he looked at me as if trying to focus my image through a telescope. And I felt the dream slipping away from me, receding into the past. Dim, jerky, far away, the discreet gold letters on a glass door. William S. Burroughs, Commissioner of Sanitation. Somehow I had not intersected. I was not one of them. It was a long time ago, and I have never aspired to political office since. The Sultan of Sewers lies buried in a distant 1930s softball game. Yeah. Well, I started to update the Ten Commandments, and I think I got through about 2 here. Thou shalt not be such a shit you don't know you are one. Is there anyone in this room who has never said to himself, my God, I acted like an absolute shit? If so, let him stand forth so that we may welcome a Latter-day Saint. Don't anyone look at me. I recall an interview with some cretinous reporter who asked me, Mr. Burroughs, is there anything in your life you regret? Anything you would do differently if you had it to do over? I just looked at him with my mouth open. What did you say? No, don't repeat it. Well, I'm lucky if I get through a day without something I did wrong. Something I regret, and you were talking about a lifetime. Go home and put your brains in order. There are mistakes too monstrous for remorse to tamper or to dally with. It's Edward Arlington Robinson. And anyone who has never made mistakes like that and paid for his mistakes, I trust him little in the commerce of the soul. No experience. Young thief thinks he has a license to steal. Young lawyer never botched a case. Young doctor never killed a patient. Politicians, however, are immune from self-criticism, and they cannot concede that they ever acted any way but the right way. Lying comes as natural to breathing as a politician and as essential for his survival. Thou shalt not drop an atom or shit one out in the first place. Yes, I'm talking to you, Dr. Robert Oppenheimer, known as Opie to his friends. If you got an atom bomb for a friend, your only enemy is a dud. When Opie heard the good news about Hiroshima, he said, thank God it wasn't a dud. What God are you thanking for Hiroshima, Oppenheimer? And Truman said, God has given us the atom bomb and he will show us how to use it. Oh, Jesus. God. It is to be remembered that on the occasion of the first atomic explosions at Alamogordo, New Mexico, that translates more or less as fat soul. So on this fat occasion, Robert Oppenheimer, the founding father, entertained the possibility of a chain reaction that would ignite the atmosphere. You're theorizing way over our heads, Opie, said the general, and speaking for the Pentagon, I don't like it. And 20 years later, Opie still believed that nuclear fission would destroy the planet. We are become death, shatterer of worlds, he said. He said it on TV and wiped it tear out of the corner of his eye with a long, skinny finger, dying of cancer at the time. And various highly placed officials appeared to say it was a very difficult decision. The decision to drop the atom bomb on Hiroshima when the Japanese were already suing for peace. And I thought, God defend us all from a difficult decision in the Pentagon. Nobody does more harm than people who feel bad about doing it. So one goes on signing petitions and supporting nuclear freezes. What else can one do? One sounded a word of warning. Brian Geisen had the all-purpose nuclear bedtime story. Some trillions of years ago, a sloppy, dirty giant flicked grease from his fingers. One of those gobs of grease is our universe on its way to the floor. Splat. Meanwhile, life, such as it is, goes on. I am frequently asked if I have any words of advice for young and old man and beasts. Perhaps the most important lesson a man can learn is this: winning and losing come in streaks. That's the law of gambling. Plunge when you win and fold when you lose, like Jesus said, to him that hath shall be given, and from him that hath not shall be taken even that which he hath, when he starts doubling up in a losing streak. It's also a law of life. Good things and bad things come in streaks. So ride a winning streak, but don't ride it too far and too fast, or you may hit a losing streak at high velocity. When you're losing, retrench, economize, stay home. Don't try anything new. Here's a few simple admonitions. Never interfere in a boy and girl fight. Beware of whores who say they don't want money. The hell they don't. What they mean is they want more money, much more. If you are doing business with a religious son of a bitch, get it in writing. His word isn't worth a shit, not with the good Lord telling him how to fuck you on the deal. If after having been exposed to someone's presence you feel like you lost a quart of plasma, avoid that presence. You need it like you need pernicious anemia. We don't like to hear the word vampire around here, trying to improve our PR. Build up a kindly, benevolent image. Interdependence is the word. Enlighten interdependence. Take a little, leave a little. However, by the inexorable logistics of the vampiric process, they always take more than they leave, and why indeed should they take any? Avoid fuck-ups. Fools, I call them. You all know the type. Everything they have anything to do with turns into a disaster. Trouble for themselves and everyone connected with them. A fool is bad news and it rubs off. Don't let it rub off on you. Do not proffer sympathy to the mentally ill. It's a bottomless pit. Tell them firmly, I have not paid to listen to this drivel. You are a terminal fool. Avoid confirmed criminals. They are a special malignant strain of fool. Look what Norman Mailer got himself into by involving himself with that archetypical criminal fool, Jack Henry Abbott. I quote from Abbott's book, "I would sell my soul for freedom, but I won't give an honest day's work or behave myself for an instant for the same thing." Surely Abbott is the fooest of the foos. Dead Souls. This is sort of a film idea loosely suggested by a sci-fi book. Dead Souls postulates that the soul is an electromagnetic field designed to occupy and activate a certain organism. While infinitely less vulnerable than the artifact it occupies, the soul can be dispersed and destroyed by a nuclear blast. This is, in fact, the ultra-secret and super-sensitive function of the atomic bomb as a soul killer, to alleviate an escalating soul glut, stacked up like cordwood and non-recyclable by the old hellfire expedient like fucking plastics. Ruins of Hiroshima on screen, pull back to show Robert Oppenheimer and the technician at a switchboard, and Robert Oppenheimer flanked by middle-aged men with a cold, dead look of heavy power. The technician twiddles his knobs. "All clear? Are you sure?" "The instruments say so." Opie says, "Thank God it wasn't a dud." "Oh, hurry up with those printouts, Joe." "Yes, sir. He looks after them salary." "Thank Joe it wasn't a dud. God doesn't know what buttons to push." However, some tough young souls, horribly maimed and very disgruntled, do just survive Hiroshima and come back to endanger national security. So the scientists are put to work to devise a super soul killer. No job too dirty for a fucking scientist. They start with animals, and there are some laboratory accidents. "Run for your lives, gentlemen. A purple-ass baboon has survived 23 skidoo. It's the most savage animal on Earth. The incandescent baboon soul rips through a steel door like wet paper. We had to vaporize the installation, lost expensive equipment and personnel. Irreplaceable, some of them, real soul food chefs. You might say cordon bleu. Well, trial and error, we now have soul killers that don't quit. State of the fart. Sure, the big fart. We know how it's all gonna end, the first sound and the last sound. Meanwhile, all personnel on planet Earth confined to quarters. A permanent party, you might say. Convince them they got no souls. It's more humane that way. Scientists always said there's no such thing as a soul. Now they're in a position to prove it. Total death, soul death. It's what the Egyptians call the second and final death. This awesome power to destroy souls forever is now vested in far-sighted and responsible men in the State Department, the CIA, and the Pentagon. The president, 500 feet down in solid rock, appears on television and gives the American people a finger. "I got mine, fuck you, every crumb for himself." Yeah, 1938, Kells Elvins and your reporter were writing a shipwreck story based on the sinking of the Titanic and also the Morro Castle. In our story, Twilight's Last Gleamings, the ship's captain puts on women's clothes and swishes into the first lifeboat. And also in this lifeboat is the ship's doctor. And this is the first appearance of Dr. Benway. There was actually an Italian steward on the Titanic who escaped in women's clothes. And I quote from an account of this: "Somewhere in the shadow of the Titanic disaster slinks a cur in human shape. Today, the most despicable human being in all the world. In that grim midnight hour, as the hero's counterwords rang out over the deep, women and children first. What did he do? He scuttled to the stateroom deck, put on a woman's skirt, a woman's hat, and a woman's veil, and filched a seat in one of the lifeboats and saved his skin. His identity is not yet known. So foul an act as that will out like murder. This man still lives. Surely he was born and saved to set for men a new standard by which to measure infamy and shame." Twilight's last gleamings, SS America off Jersey coast. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no cause for alarm. We have a minor problem in the boiler room, but everything is now under sound effects of a nuclear blast. Explosion splits the boat. A paretic named Perkins screams from his shattered wheelchair, "You pithy ass son of a bit." Dr. Benway, ship's doctor, drunkenly added 2 inches to a 4-inch incision with one stroke of his scalpel. "Perhaps the appendix is already out, doctor," the nurse said, peering dubiously over his shoulder. "I saw a little scar." "Appendix out? I'm taking the appendix out. What do you think I'm doing here?" "Perhaps the appendix on the left side, doctor. That happens sometimes, you know." "Stop breathing down my neck. I'm coming to that. Don't you think I know where an appendix is? I studied appendectomy in 1904 at Harvard." He lifted the abdominal wall and searched along the incision, dropping ashes from his cigarette. He thrust a red fist at her. "And get me a new scalpel. This one's got no edge to it." The doctor flattened against the wall. The patient slid off the operating table, spilling intestines across the floor. "Sober up. I can't be expected to work under such conditions." Swept instruments, cocaine, and morphine into his satchel, tilted out of the operating room. Mike Dyer, politician from Clayton, Missouri, rushed into the first-class lounge, crossed to the jukebox, selected the Star-Spangled Banner with Fats Terminal at the electric organ, and shoved home a handful of quarters. "Oh, say, can you see Captain Kramer putting the finishing touches to his heavy makeup? Now a green cloche hat and a fox stole, one of those horrid creations where the fox's mouth forms a clasp. Rather Sadie Thompson," he decides, slipping a .32 automatic into his handbag. Dr. Benway pushed through a crowd at the rail and boarded the first lifeboat. "Are you all right?" he said, seating himself among the women. "I'm the doctor." O'er the ramparts we watch. The captain stiff arms an old lady and fills the first lifeboat. The boat is lowered jerkily by male passengers. Dr. Benway casts off. Our flag was still there. It happens in every shipwreck. Something people don't like to talk about. See, people keep trying to get in the lifeboats that are already full, and someone has to cut their fingers off with a butcher knife. In our story, a partially paralyzed paretic is the instrument. Somebody gives him the knife and tells him what he has to do. A hand reaches out and closes on the boat side. Spring like Perkins brings down the knife. The hand slips away. Finger stubs fall into the boat. Attaboy, comrade, don't let 'em swamp us. The crew pull on the oars. Perkins works feverishly, cutting on all sides. His false teeth fly out with the speed of a striking snake. He snaps them back into his mouth. Bastard thunderbitches, bastard thunderbitches. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave? Barbara Cannon showed your reporter her souvenirs of the disaster. A life belt autographed by the crew and a severed human finger. I don't know, she said, I feel sort of bad about this old finger. Or the land of the free and the home of the brave. Daddy Longlegs looked like Uncle Sam on stilts, and he ran this osteopathic clinic outside East St. Louis and took in a few junkie patients. For 2 notes a week, you could stay on the nodding green lawn chairs and look up the oaks and grass stretching down to a little lake in the sun. And the nurse moves around with a silver tray feeding the junkie, and we called her mother, wouldn't you? Doc Benway and me was holed up there after a ramble in Dallas involving this aphrodisiac ointment, and Doc goofed on ether and mixed in too much Spanish fly and burned the prick off the police commissioner. So we come to Daddy Longlegs to cool off, and we find him cool and casual in a dark room with potted rubber plants and a silver tray where he likes to see a week in advance. The nurse shows us to a room with rose wallpaper, and we have this bell any hour of the day or night just ringing. Mother charges in with a loaded hypo. One day we were sitting out on the lawn chairs with lap robes. It was a fall day, leaves changing, sun cold on the lake. So we check out of the clinic and rent a house, and Doc starts cooking up this green junk. And the basement is full of tanks, smell like a compost heap of junkies. So finally he draws off this heavy green fluid and loads it into a hypo big as a bicycle pump. Now he must find a worthy vessel, he says. So we flush out this old goofball artist and tell him it is pure Chinese H from the Ling dynasty. And Doc shoots the whole pint of green right into the main line. And the yellow jacket turns fibrous gray-green and withers up like an old turnip. And I say, I'm getting out of here, me. And Doc says, an unworthy vessel, obviously. I withdraw from the case. This is a folkloric text from the Federal Narcotics Hospital at Lexington, Kentucky. There is an exclusive wing of Lexington reserved for the do-rights, who are considered good rehabilitation prospects. They get better rooms and more medication. They always show up with letters from their clergyman and employer and congressman. You know the type. Falls all over himself to light the boss's cigarette. The doctor walks into the ward, rather warm in here. As one man, the do-rights break out in a sweat and rush around opening windows. A bit cold in here, isn't it? Immediately, the do-rights see their breath in the air, snatch blankets and bundle themselves up to a chorus of chattering teeth. Front office, brown nose, pink to the bone. Doctor, when I die, I want to be buried right in the same coffin with you. You're the finest sea, most decent, the most deeply humane man I've ever known. I'm putting you down for additional medication, son. Thank you, doctor. Pushers should receive the death penalty. It's the old army game from here to eternity. Get there bursters with the brownest nose. While down the dim gray wards and day rooms, where the do-wrongs hawk and spit and shiver and vomit, fucking croaker wouldn't give me a goop bowl. Ask me what the American flag means to me, and I tell him soak it in heroin, doc, and I'll suck it. He says I got the wrong attitude. I should see the chaplain get straight with Jesus. And then, with the tears streaming down their lousy pink faces, the do-rights leap up as one man and bellow out the Star-Spangled Banner. It isn't something you automatically get for believing some dogmatic system like Christianity or Islam. It was something you have to work and fight for, like everything else in this life or another. The most unpleasant, precarious, and bureaucratic immortality blueprint was drafted by the ancient Egyptians. First, you had to get yourself mummified, and that was very expensive, making immortality a monopoly of the truly rich. Then your continued immortality in the Western lands, that's Egyptian paradise, is entirely dependent on the continued existence of your mummy. That is why they had their mummies guarded by demons and hid good. Now here is plain G.I. Ali. He's got enough baraka, that is, vigor to survive his first physical death. He won't get far. He's got no mummy, he's got no names, he's got nothing. What happens to a bum like that, a nameless, mummyless asshole? Why, demons will swarm all over him at the first checkpoint. He will be dismembered and thrown into a flaming pit, where his soul will be utterly consumed and destroyed. While others with sound mummies and the right names to drop in the right places sail through to the Western lands. There are, of course, those who just barely squeeze through. Their mummies are not in a sound sanitary condition. These second-class souls are relegated to third-rate transient hotels just beyond the last checkpoint, where they can smell the charnel house disposal ovens from their skimpy balconies. You see that sign the bartender snarls, "Maggoty mummies will not be served here." Might as well face facts. My mummy is going downhill. Cheap job to begin with. God, maggots is crawling all over it. The way that demon guard sniffed at me this morning. Transient hotels. And here you are in your luxury condo deep in the Western lands. You got no security. Some disgruntled former employee sneaks into your tomb and throws acid on your mummy, or sloshes gasoline all over and burns the shit out of it. Oh, someone is fucking with my mummy. Brother, you are fucked. Mummies are sitting ducks. No matter who you are, what can happen to your mummy is a pharaoh's nightmare. The dreaded mummy bashers, grave robbers, scavengers, floods, volcanoes, earthquakes, explosions. My God, the worst thing can happen to a mummy. No nukes is good nukes to a mummy. Mummies are dedicated pacifists. A mummy's best friend is an Egyptologist sealed in glass case, kept at a constant temperature, but your mummy isn't even safe in a museum. Here, Cyrus, it's the Blitz. For God's sakes, get us into the vaults, they scream, without a throat, without a tongue. Anybody buy into that deal should have his mummy examined. Consider the impasse of a one-God universe. He can't go anywhere since he is already everywhere. He can't do anything since the act of doing presupposes opposition. His universe is irrevocably thermodynamic, having no friction by definition, so he has to create friction, war, fear, and death to keep his dying show on the road. And sooner or later, he's going to have to start baking it. Look, boss, we don't have enough energy left to fry an elderly woman in a flea bag hotel fire. Well, we'll have to start baking it. Sure, and leave the details to Joe. Look, from a real disaster, you get a pig of energy. Sacrifice, heroism, grief, separation, fear, and violent death. So from an energy surplus, you can underwrite the next one. But if the first one's a fake, you can't underwrite a shithouse. Try to explain to God Almighty where his one-God universe is going. Abandon ship, goddammit, every man for himself. Like the great Gatsby, Kim believes in the green light. He believes in a magical universe, unpredictable, spontaneous, alive, a universe where anything is possible, a universe of many gods, often in conflict. So the paradox of an all-knowing, all-powerful God, who nonetheless permits suffering, evil, and death, does not arise. We got a famine here, Osiris. What happened? Well, you can't win them all. I'm hustling myself. Can you give us immortality? Get you an extension, maybe. Take you as far as the first checkpoint. You'll have to make it from there on your own. Most of them don't. Figure about 1 in a million. And biologically speaking, that's very good odds. Thank you. The lavatory has been locked for 3 hours solid. I think they're using it for an operating room. Nurse, I can't find her pulse, doctor. Dr. Benway, cardiac arrest, God damn it. He looks around and picks up one of those rubber vacuum cups at the end of a stick they use to unstop toilets. He advances on the patient. Make an incision, Dr. Limp, he says to his appalled assistants. I'm going to massage the heart. Dr. Limp shrugs and begins the incision. Dr. Benway washes the suction cup by swishing it around in the toilet bowl. Nurse, shouldn't it be sterilized, doctor? Dr. Benway, very likely, but there's no time. He sits on the suction cup like a cane seat, watching his assistant make the incision. You young squirts couldn't lance a pimple without an electric vibrating scalpel with automatic drain and suture. All the skill is going out of surgery, all the know-how and make do. Did I ever tell you about the time I performed an appendectomy with a rusty sardine can? And once I was caught short without instrument 1 and removed an uterine tumor with my teeth. Yeah, well, that was in the upper Fendi, and besides, the wench is dead. The incision is ready, doctor. Dr. Benway forces the cup into the incision and works it up and down. Blood spurts all over the doctors, the nurse, and the wall, and the cup makes a horrible sucking sound. Nurse, I think she's gone, doctor. Well, it's only a day's work. He walks across the room to a medicine cabinet. Some fucking drug addict has cut my cocaine with Saniflush. Nurse, send the boy out to fill this RX on the double. Thank you. Thank you.